Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. This is June, what are we, June 19th, 2025. And I'm going to turn this over to Ximena, who's our host today for our Edgewalker Café.
Thank you, Judy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's cafe on artificial intelligence from an Edgewalker's perspective. I'm really excited to be here, and I know that Bill and Prasad are also excited to be talking about these things. No? So before we begin, I'd like to start with a short centering exercise, and you can choose to close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them open, just to kind of bring us into this space and be truly present and away from, as we were saying before, we open the room, away from the 1,000 browsers that we usually have open, the notifications, everything that's going on outside of this cafe. So I invite you to sit back in your chair. Feel your feet on the floor. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Soften your jaw. Relax your hands. And now take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out slowly through your mouth. One more time. Breathe in and release. And you can open your eyes. And as you do, notice the space around you, the room you're in, the light, the sounds. I'm gonna and you are here now in this moment. And now bring your attention to this gathering. We're spread across the world. Bring your attention to the other Edgewalkers who have chosen to be in this exploration with you today. Yeah. So with that, welcome everyone. I'd like to start introducing our panelists, Prasad Kaipa and Bill Kirst. So Prasad is a physicist, author, advisor, and thought leader at the intersection of science, leadership, and Indic wisdom. A former Apple Fellow and co-author of From Smart to Wise, he has coached CEOs and helped global organizations integrate innovation with inner purpose. As co-founder of the Institute of Indic Wisdom, he explores ethical and consciousness-centered approaches to AI, drawing on Advaita Vedanta to reimagine human-AI symbiosis as a path towards shared awakening. His work is deeply informed by early training in Sanskrit and the Shastras, as well as decades of collaboration with institutions like the Fetzer Institute, dedicated to advancing spiritual and moral development. Known for his joyful and reflective presence, and we have an Edgewalker Café almost a year ago to this day, where he talks about that. He bridges ancient spiritual traditions with cutting-edge technology to help leaders evolve from brilliance to wisdom. So welcome, Prasad. And Bill is an accomplished change management leader, published author and poet, and the host of the podcast Coffee and Change, where he explores stories of adaptation and growth in an evolving world. At Adobe, he leads initiatives at the intersection of technology and human behavior, with a mission to empower organizations through purposeful change. His work is informed by over 20 years of experience across industries, along with his commitment to fostering meaningful dialogue about AI, innovation, leadership, and transformation. He is also a certified Edgewalker facilitator and the author of the newsletter Leading Change in the Era of AI. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And I'm Ximena Vidal, your host. And in case you haven't, I published a blog or a post in Edgewalkers Substack in the wee hours of the morning. And I'm currently working on my dissertation where I explore how AI tools can help address hidden challenges in doctoral education. And I'm also a certified Edgewalker facilitator and have been working alongside Judy and the Edgewalker community this past year on organizational alignment. And I'm an enthusiastic AI tinkerer. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation because the more that I've been using, the more that I use AI, the more questions arise. And I think we're at the perfect moment right now to take a little bit of time to ask deeper questions about human nature, progress, what is shaping AI or AI future, and what it means to walk consciously in this transformative moment. So before we begin, Bill, Prasad, I don't know if you have anything to say before I jump in with questions.
I love being here with you and Bill and Judy and all the Edgewalkers gang. So I acknowledge several people whom I know, Julia, Shubha, Debbie, so many people I have met before. So I'm excited to explore this topic with you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Some familiar faces, some new ones. So great to meet you. I love that you called it tinkering, Ximena. And may we all tinker together. I'm really excited for what we're going to unveil and put together with a little bit of playfulness.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning that, because the three of us are in agreement that we have, because I prepared some questions that I shared with Bill and Prasad, but we're all in this together and we're co-creating the discussion, and we're going to let our intuition guide where we end up. We might end up talking about, other things than the questions that I had shared. So here we go. I'd like to begin with a question about a fundamental tension in AI development right now. Mainly, there are two broad camps in AI development. On one hand, we have acceleration-driven approaches like OpenAI's rapid deployment. And on the other, we have alignment-driven approaches like Anthropic's constitutional AI that are based on the UN Declaration of Human Rights or Google's Sparrow principles with DeepMind. So what I'm seeing is that even though both perspectives draw from different foundations, like almost ethical foundations, ultimately AI is being marketed as a productivity enhancement, to do more faster with less effort and less human resources. It's a very capitalistic, perspective, but it's what I'm seeing, with the articles and, videos that I'm consuming, lately. So, and this approach seems rooted what we might call the Protestant work ethic. Now, this deep cultural belief that worthiness comes from hard work, that success only counts if it's a result of sweat and tears, and that it's struggle what gives work and our lives meaning. So turning over to Prasad and Bill, Prasad, your Advaitic perspective and work that embeds compassion into AI suggests a different foundation from which we can approach AI and continue to develop these tools. And Bill, in one of your newsletters, you and Aaron critique the efficiency over human relationships mindset. And you've also talked about the megalomaniacs driving AI development, noting how profit and political motives can override ethical considerations. So the question that I want to ask you is, towards what some might call genuine development, however that is defined, but it's different from productivity focused AI.
Prasad, do you want to begin?
Sure, I'll start. Couple of things come to my mind as I look at all the people from around the world, South Africa to United States to Japan to everywhere else. It is the presence of each of us that actually brings liveliness and kind of excitement and energy to share whatever we want to share. So from that perspective, if I were to say it is not about productivity, but it is the presence and the ability to be with each other. And I don't think, I think several times we struggle and we mistake that struggle for sincerity. So from a philosophical perspective, I would say it is not how hard we work, but how consciously we act when we act. So if AI can be used to enable our presence, like Ximena, when I looked at your blog this morning, it's Substack note, it is not about shame, but it is about co-creating. So for me, there are beautiful quotes in philosophical tradition of India where it says, I'll just quote for a small thing. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. What it means is where the word doesn't reach, where the mind cannot penetrate, that's where you are. And who you are and what you bring as your own contribution, that is where the energy flows, the presence flows. So sometimes what we do gets in the way of who we are. If we can pay attention to who we are, we can dance with the AI beautifully. And then we look at that providing the help and we providing the wisdom. Bill?
Beautifully said. Thank you, Prasad. It's interesting, Ximena, as you reflected in your article. One of the first things I did this morning was I grabbed the notebook, the first notebook that I started writing in when I began my Edgewalkers journey. And on the first page, I wrote a quote that I actually termed the Edgewalkers epilogue. And this is the quote I wrote for myself. If I am so unlovable, then my only option for survival is to be exceptional. And what I think is really powerful about what you're talking about and what Prasad is talking about is that scarcity and that shame. And so much of society and these terms like productivity are rooted in that scarcity and shame. And I think when we internalize what I believe has been essentially a lie, maybe a white lie told to us over our lifetime, that effort equals virtue.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to not only investigate that, but in some cases reject that. If we're not toiling, if we're not burning out, then people think or believe that we're not worthy of catching our own breath.
Right.
And to me, that is a loss of dignity. Like, how can we flourish if we cannot breathe?
Yeah.
It's to me, it's really, really important that we don't equate exhaustion with production. And I love how you talk, Prasad, about presence, because if you don't have presence, if you don't have meaning, then you cannot discern. You certainly cannot do introspection. And the tension of what we're holding in this moment is exactly what you said, Prasad. Go where the mind cannot go. Go to the edges. We're all Edgewalkers, and we're all talking about this for a reason. We run toward those places of tension because we're actually wired differently to carry that tension. So when I think about how to use the AI towards human flourishing, I use it more like a guide on the side. I dare to call it a little bit of a mystical companion. I don't see it as a productivity tool. I do think of it as like almost like a co-regulator, in the sense of the more I tap into the mystical, the more I lean into understanding what's sometimes downloading to me and coming to me in a nonlinear way. And so if these tools can help me understand and share with the world easier those musings or those nudges, to me that's not about scale or output, that's about awe, AWE, awe. And I wonder sometimes, what if these tools in the right hands, to your point, Ximena, in the right hands, are not built to extract more from us, but to listen deeper for what's already there. And that, to your point, is around how it's designed. Are we designing it with dignity in mind? Are we designing with speed in mind? Are we designing with profit in mind? And all three of those are controversial questions.
Thank you. Thank you both. And yes, I you know, I've been nodding and, you know, like taking notes while you were talking. And there's one thing I've also been thinking about is with the productivity, so that, you know, we're using these tools. In my case, it's shortening the time and it's lessening the anxiety, you know, of producing, you know, of sharing, you know, like for example, you know, like sharing the Substack post, you know, of writing the Substack post. And as these tools help us free up our time, I feel like we have then, I mean, it's interesting to think about, do we now have a choice to spend that time for leisure, for more human connection? And, you know, in my case, like I'm so, you know, like this productivity mindset is so ingrained in me that I'm like, wait, now, you know, I can do this faster. I can do more now, and I can be better. And, you know, whereas if I take a moment and embrace what Prasad is saying about presence, you know, about how AI is enabling our presence, I think it can enable our presence as we're using the tool, but also it can enable the presence in our life when we're not with the tool, you know. So having dinner with friends, or even writing in my journal, or which I never do, but it's always on my to-do list, no, but or taking a walk. So, but you know, like I recognize that it's difficult for me to shed that, oh, wait, no, but I should be doing something else, no? And so I wonder, like, can we move past it? No, like, can we, and if so, like, how do we, and like, I'm wondering if AI, you know, if there are AI tools that can be designed to work themselves out of the job, no, for like to prop us up, for us to not need it anymore. And anyways, like, it's an open-ended question. I mean, we can, you know, you can respond to it or not, or I can, you know, I go on to another, you know.
I'm happy to jump in a little bit here, because we do talk a lot about, and we read a lot about these articles about displacement of jobs. And I'll just name a truth. You know, my last employer was Microsoft, and they're now in several rounds of layoffs. Another several thousand people are being laid off this week, and it's being attributed to AI. These are salespeople. One of the things I find it almost an obligation, a duty of mine, is to reach out to these people that are impacted by this and help them. I mean, I personally believe something like sales or even marketing, if we want to look at that, what is it? At the core, it's a bid for connection. Every sales motion, every marketing motion is a bid for connection. And it's not lost on me that the technologies are actually impacting the lives of people who, at their heart and at their core, are doing the work they do because their heart calls them to do it. All of those people are now unseated by this technology. And I think it's why Edgewalker cafes like this, we have to have real discerning conversations about what role we play using this technology. But more importantly, as you said, Ximena, spending time around the kitchen tables, around the living rooms, around the boardrooms, asking questions about, does this feel right? Even the fact that we have to ask the question, the answer probably is no. So what do we do about it? How do we lean more into our humanity with this? And there aren't answers for this, but I would say listen to your heart first, and then draw concentric circles from there.
I love
Thank
what you said, Bill. You're right. There are lots of jobs that people are getting rid of. Previously, they gave different reasons why they let go. Now they say it is because of AI. It is true that AI can increase productivity, but I was talking to a senior fellow in Microsoft actually just about a week ago, and he was telling me to look at all these coding that is being done by the AI support, Copilot. You need more number of people to correct the mistakes that the AI is doing. But nobody is paying attention to hiring people to make sure, to babysit the AI part of it. Because, it says, oh, I don't have enough tokens, so I'm going to cut short what you are telling me, or I don't remember what you have been discussing because the conversation with you is so long, or you are talking about so many different topics. In integrating it, I lost the thread. So these are 3 or 4 common things that I have found in working with AI. So what it means is you might have started out right with the right code, but somewhere you lost some of the things. So who is watching that? So in terms of productivity, we bring that element of asking the right questions that allows AI to dig brainlessly, mindlessly, to predict what could be the answer. So it is great that it is sorting out the details. But it is like trying to bring information from data. That's all the AI is doing. So the prediction model, whether it is transformers and the large language models, can only do so much, burning so much of energy in responding to questions, but it doesn't, first of all, reason. That was the big difference between some of the American AI models versus the DeepSeek. If you start building, what is it that I want? Why do I want that? And in what context? If you were to ask three questions before you do whatever you do with the AI, it does what is called a proximity search. It doesn't do search of everything, everywhere, every place. So that means by clarifying why we ask, what we ask, in what context, and what do we plan to do, that goes from prediction to reasoning to reflection to intentionality. I think that is what will make AI to become wiser. But the key part for us is, I don't think AI will become wiser. It may become smarter. It has already become smarter, even though there is no smartness in the large language model. But with our help, we can come up with the smarter conclusions. But I think it is like, like the reflection. We are polishing the mirror, but we are not looking at the light that illuminates both us and the reflection in the mirror. With no light, the reflection becomes zero. The mirror can be extraordinary. Who is providing the light? Who is the lamp in this? It is the human who is questioning, engaging, and working with the AI. So we are the lamp. AI is the mirror. So I don't think we need to worry about the kind of jobs that are being gone, even though for people who are losing the job, that is significant. But we need to start looking at how to create the value that we bring. I think that is the existential question. Who are we? What do we contribute? What does it mean to be human, or a leader, or a change agent, or an edge walker? We talk about being in the liminal space, walking the edge between the two worlds. That's what Edgewalker is all about. So I think that is the symbiosis that we need to bring into the world. And there are no better people than Edgewalkers to do that.
Beautifully said.
Yes, thank you. And what I'm thinking now is the world of work now is changing, as we just discussed, and it makes me like, I'm an educator now, and so I'm doing a doctorate right now, and so I ask, like, what are the implications of this on education? Like, what really matters? Like, what really matters when it comes to learning? What skills? Like, I read Anthropic just published, I don't know if it's just or when, but I saw it yesterday, a course on AI fluency, and yet, hearing you both speak, yes, AI fluency, yes, is important, but how do you develop the reasoning, like the ability to take what, because, and I lived it myself when I was preparing these questions, like I prepared the questions, and then when I sat down to read them, I'm like, wait, but this, like, I'm saying the same thing here. Like, if I had solely relied and just blindly relied on, on how the questions were organized, it wouldn't, and if I had, if I were rigid enough to adhere to that and to feel nervous, and anxious if we're straying away from the questions, like, how can we instill that flexibility, which I think only comes from a strong core? Like, you have like, how do we, what is that strong core about? And how can we instill that in workers today, and in future generations?
Yeah, I think I want to pick up on what Prasad said about the lamp. I think I've used this before somewhere, but very similar. I kept hearing the words in dreams and sort of journaling, be the lamplighter.
Yeah.
And then if you take it even further, it's be the lighthouse keeper, right? So the analogies I want to use are exactly what Prasad was saying, which is a mirror can be divine, but if it's in darkness, it's essentially inept. And the other part of this, I think, is that each of us have our own divine light. I almost call it a pilot light, right? Don't let your pilot light go out. The winds of change are happening. The storms are blowing. Protect that pilot light. I think the point around reflection and reasoning and even, again, the word discernment, those are things that I believe will never be reached by this technology. I've stated that. People have said, but what about AGI? It's gonna. I've read everything there is to read. I've listened to everything by the luminaries. I still stand in the fact that reflection and reasoning are uniquely human things. They can claim it, and there are tools inside tools that say, here's the reasoning engine, here's the reflection engine. It's not, as Prasad said, it is not. I think you can only access those things by understanding the power of grief, of swimming in the depths of loss, of yearning, of striving, of dreaming. And as Prasad, you said, like, these are pattern recognizing machines, very succinct pattern recognizing machines. And that's why I believe it will never achieve the reflection, the reasoning that we talk about that makes us uniquely human. And Ximena, to your question around, how do we organize some of our, what I would consider divine, although disparate thoughts, right? Because a lot of times we have to go into the world, and I often have these very powerful dreams that come to me in the liminal. And I think to myself, well, I've got to do something with it. And so maybe what we do is we chicken scratch in the dark without our lamp, right? Some words that come to us. And then we say, oh, I'm going to read it tomorrow morning and it'll make sense to me. I actually use some of this technology, and again, that mystical companion way. Sometimes I'll grab my phone in the middle of the night when I wake up, and the dream is so vivid. It is real. And I just almost close my eyes and type into this tool. And I almost don't even ask it a question sometimes. I just, put it into that void. And what ends up coming back to me is kind of this interesting, again, guide on the side. It comes back and it says, well, that's interesting and awfully disparate and disconnected, but this may be what the thread is. Now, do I take it for sacrosanct? No. Do I take it for truth? No. But what it helps me do is get something that appears almost ethereal and make it real, right? So take it out of the ethereal and make it real. And then I go into my day with a little more strength in the light that is coming out of the lighthouse. I have a little more dignity standing in the lighthouse and saying, I'm gonna keep this light on for this reason. That's a way I didn't expect to use this technology, but in a way, it's bringing to life things that I know as an Edgewalker need to come through me, right? I'm a human tuning fork. I'm a human antenna. I believe there are things coming to me for a reason. And I believe sometimes the best way to get that out is to use this technology to help me frame it, or in some cases, visualize it. We haven't talked about the visual, power of the artistic side of some of this, as well as the negative, which is all the copyright stuff. But that's one way I'm using it. To your point, I really resonated with your post this morning, because we are creatives at heart, and creativity in itself is a bit of chaos. So maybe we can use some of these tools to help us move from the chaos to the creation and then to the discernment. That's some of my initial thinking there. Prasad, would welcome your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Ximena. Couple of things that come up is like what you said as the guide on the side. There are three things that long time ago, I'm talking 30 years ago, with a guy called David Thornburg, who was a futurist. We used to explore. Being a sage on the stage was fashionable at one time. As a matter of fact, I wanted to be a sage on the stage, but because I was a physicist, and then I was in artificial intelligence, and then I was in marketing, I was like Rolling Stone. And I didn't have the self-confidence or acceptance in myself, let alone with other people, to really be a sage on the stage in any topic for that matter. So at that time in 1990s, after I quit Apple, and as I was looking at, I said, at the most I can be a guide on the side. And as I looked at and as I went through, for example, there was a time somebody came to me and said, uh, uh, one famous person, what you call, Deepak Chopra, probably many of you might have heard of. He is being asked to do some corporate seminars, and you are very good in leadership and change management stuff. He will come and give some talks, but you need to provide and develop a workshop around a one-day workshop around it. He will be the sage on the stage, and you will be the guide on the side. I didn't know whether I should be excited or insulted by it, because I said, wait a minute, you are a medical doctor talking about quantum mechanics. I have a PhD in quantum mechanics, and I was a 6-year, professor in University of Utah in physics. And you want me to interpret your physics stuff and talk about it in leadership. So on the other hand, he was like, hot, writing so many books, and he was on Oprah Winfrey, and his stuff was flowing everywhere, and everybody were talking about me. So I was really jealous and upset and looking at opportunity all at the same time. So that's when I looked at it and said, Deepak is a perfect sage on the stage. He has the presence, he has the ability, and he captured the imagination of a lot of people. But at the same time, when he needs to be guide on the side, that's exactly what I am. I'm not interested in preaching and telling other people what they need to do, but I can be vulnerable, I can learn with people, I can change with other people, because I am in the edge. And I am not a catalyst who will remain unchanged while the change happens around me. You change me, I change you, we change each other. That is the model, that I believe at some level we propose as Edgewalkers to a certain extent. Our passion, our connection, our purpose shapes other people's purpose, other people. So in some respects, for me, bringing it back to what you were saying, Ximena, we cannot build AI as something that is separate, because then we deepen the separation between conscious and not so conscious. So yes, AGI we talk about, AI might become self-aware and might become that. But you know what? We have access to consciousness. We can be self-conscious. How many times are we operating out of our awareness and consciousness instead of being on autopilot? We don't need AI to tell us what it means, but I think the uncertainty, the kind of shame that you mentioned, Ximena, in your blog, and in the question of Protestant work ethic, it all comes down to we don't know what it means to flourish. Sometimes we get stuck in the paradigm of change within the box, but we don't recognize our job as the Edgewalkers is to break the box. It is about not incremental change, but personal transformation, and organizational transformation is what we seek. And that transformation begins with transforming self. And that transforming self requires awareness, it requires reflection, and it requires discernment. None of them the AI can ever provide. So what it means is, to a certain extent, we don't need to work on whether the embedded conscience or consciousness from AI, is it ever going to be a worry? Because we have had so many human beings who have same access to consciousness, same access to self-awareness, same access to divinity. I know in some religions to think about we can be divine is blasphemous, but in the Indian context, especially the Advaitic sense, we are not gods, but we have the same access to divinity as gods have. It is about who do you choose to be, where do you act from, is more important than what are we acting on and what are we producing. So if I were to summarize some of this, what it comes down to me is there is a fantastic opportunity for us to be really deeper, loving, meaningful human beings, because AI is really putting a mirror and saying, Emperor has no clothes. You guys, as human beings, you are not providing any value. We can provide more productivity, more value, more efficiency than you can do with all your evolutionary growth. Better wake up and smell the flowers, right? That's what the AI is actually giving us, a wake up call. In that context, I would say loving ourselves, not from the Protestant work ethic. I call it a GPS system: guilt, pride, and shame. GPS for human beings is guilt, pride, and shame.
Mhm.
That's the one that nails us to, and it tells everybody where we are. Like GPS locates you where you are in three-dimensional coordinates, but guilt, pride, and shame and Protestant work ethic nails you to where you are. And that's how the society, that's how the religion, that is how the external structure controls us, instead of allowing us to change and do that. But instead, what we need to look at is to transform that. Like, I had been looking at a framework for love, spiral of love, and now Julia and myself are writing up a paper about the 7 layers of love spiral. And it begins with self-acceptance, self-confidence, and self-compassion. Because without these three, we cannot look at other people. We don't have the ability to be with others till we can be with ourselves without being self-critical, without having the self-belief, and without having the self-compassion. So I do believe that AI is giving us an opportunity to be fully present, fully wake up to our potential, our reality, and start walking at the edge of who we have been to who we can be and who we are, have the potential to live and love and lead. I think that's what the opportunity of being in this time provides for me.
Yeah, I think that's so beautifully. I mean, I'm stirred by that GPS thing, Prasad, because as a self-professed Irish Roman Catholic, that GPS thing is so powerful. I'm going to be writing that down. One thing I would add is I'm thinking so much about this. You know, when I use these tools and when I enter, for example, I always enter long prompts, like really long prompts, right? Because our mind, it's not linear. It's not meant to be linear. But when I enter really long prompts, what emerges for me is often not resolution. It's a reverence. It's a reverence for something I already knew about myself. It's just coming in a different frequency. It's coming in a different channel. And what that does for me is it sort of bridges us between each other through this very advanced technology. And that brings me back to awe, right? The minute I think that we are that different, I'm reminded that we are all the same. And so we walk this bridge together, not to conquer the other side, but to deepen our own belonging. Like Prasad was saying, deepen our own belonging.
Yeah.
That to me is where this has been generative as opposed to restrictive, while also balancing the GPS that we're all struggling with.
I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts, not just as a facilitator asking questions, because you are a graduate student who are working on all this stuff. And what are you discovering? What are your thoughts?
It's unfolding and changing every day. As I said at the beginning, like I tinker now with AI, and I'm finding I don't quite understand how it is that it's helping me with my dissertation, which has been, I feel like Sisyphus, like just trying to get it over a mountain and just not making any progress. My dissertation chair is actually present. Julia is here. And she's been witness and yes, to all of that. But I'm giving myself the freedom to use it in however way I move to use it at whatever time. And so and trying not to answer the question as I'm using. I know, like the question of how is it that it's helping me? It's like, I don't know how it is, but all I know is that yesterday, my post, it was 9 p.m. and I'm like, oh, wait, I have to write a Substack. And, and the minute that I acknowledge that and I asked for help, I went to ChatGPT and I said, like, I need just not a long prompt, just like, I need help. What do I do? Something in me, it's like, I don't know if it's like a reassurance or a regulator, like Bill, you said at the beginning, like an emotional regulator or what it is, but it prompted me to write something. And ultimately what like the blog post is the Substack post. Now you can tell my age. No, like with blogs, I feel satisfied with it. Like I feel, like, yes, it reflects who I am, and it allowed me to balance vulnerability with not it being a sob story, not it being, like a confessional, like, but just it helped me to modulate just enough vulnerability and authenticity, that's whole debate, like what authenticity it really is, but in a way that that I am communicating with others. And Bill, you said that the blog post resonated with you. And I have a feeling that if I had written in like as if it were a journal or if it's, a confessional, it wouldn't have had that same impact. No. So so I'm right now in this experimental, like, I don't know what's happening, but it's helping me move forward. It's helping me I don't yet exactly know how it's helping me or in what ways, but I know I'm making progress in different areas in my life. And I'm conscious about the time, because we do, like we have, should close by we have until 11. And Judy, thank you for adding the announcements, because I was wondering if we could add, if we can have at least one question from the audience. Judy, is that okay? Like or should we do the announcements and then the question? Because I also know that the cafes are also a space for Edgewalkers to share what they're working on as well.
Right, thank you. Yeah, there's two questions that I saw, and I'm sure there's more. One, Jim Lockhart has asked about environmental impact, and Brian has asked about education systems. So I'd love for both of those questions to come in. There's a million more. Like I just came across somebody who says AI is God. Mike Dooley, so somebody I follow, so he has conversations with God. And, there's like all these intriguing things. I think we're just going to have to continue this conversation. But let's have a couple of those questions, starting with Jim and Brian. I put the announcements in the chat so we don't have to take up time saying those, but it would be good for other facilitators to announce things they have. So we could do that right at the very end, just before you have closing comments.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a first pass. These are great questions that require whole separate conversations around the environment and education. I will say I'm very, very concerned about the environment. I actually think now in tablespoons of water being used each time I put a prompt in. I am also very conscious of the fact that former employers of mine, Microsoft in particular, literally bought 3 Mile Island, which was a shuttered nuclear site, in order to tap into the level of power they need. OpenAI has a super data center down in Abilene, Texas, which is called Stargate. I encourage you all to research about these things, because there is a huge environmental impact that I think a lot of people are choosing to kick the can down the road, and that is going to haunt us. I don't have answers right now on that. I just think we need to be the ones asking the questions constantly and always, and be thinking about it every time we use this technology, and discerning. On the education space, I also sit on a board at my alma mater, Johns Hopkins, and we're all trying to figure this out. I will tell you right now, there's a great video, which I will share with Judy and the rest. Yesterday, OpenAI just asked a bunch of college students, just handed them mics and said, how do you use this? And without being prompted, they anthropomorphized this. They call it chat. They don't call it chat GPT. They call it chat, and they say it in such a way that it sounds like they're saying Chet or Chad. And this has become their companion. So I worry about the cognitive atrophy that is happening in education right now, because critical thinking is going out the door. I am hopeful that creativity is, coming into that space, but I'm not as hopeful. Prasad?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think those are some important points you bring. My feeling is that, considering that we are bridge builders, as Edgewalkers, what is the bridge between? One is the inner silence. As some of you mentioned, it is the silence that is the source of creativity. It is not the chatter. So, chatter, chat GPT, all of that might be able to manipulate what is already coming out of that silence, but it cannot touch the silence. On the other hand, if one side is inner silence, and if we are the bridge, what is on the other side? Like, I remember somebody mentioning, like the change is the pregnancy, learning is the baby, or the other way around. Learning is the pregnancy and change is the baby. Frank, I forgot, it's almost 35 years ago. I read that article where he talked about the relationship between change and learning. So for me, it is like what you learn is the source, but what you create is the innovation. So I would say we are bridging between inner stillness and outer creativity and innovation. That is what Edgewalkers can uniquely bring, because integration is not compromise, but it is the coherence. So the edge that we are walking on is not a chasm. I know in Buddhists talk about it as the sunyata, is the emptiness. But that emptiness is not empty, it is full of potential. We say, the like 5 elements in Indian context is, in addition to air and fire and, the earth and water, we also talk about space. Space as something that is one of the 5 elements, because space looks empty, but that is where infinite potential lies. So and so that means you can walk with reverence, you can look at the emptiness from certain reflection, and if we can walk with one foot in wisdom, then the second foot will lead to invention. So for me, it is that liminal space that Edgewalkers walk is what we need to bring to working with AI. So now let me answer the questions directly in with this introduction. Yep, there are environmental degradations, and it, like somebody mentioned, even if you say thank you and you are nice, and if you try to be nice to AI, even to process that niceties, it takes billion watts of electricity. So somebody said to me, don't try to be nice, just be crisp and specific to AI, because you don't want more electricity to be used up, more environmental degradation to take place. But on the other side, you also look at it and say, how do we mine the energy from the sun? It's actually, there is so much sun, like living in California, or, I went to Nevada last week. There is so much of heat. If we can figure out a way to transform some of that. So the idea of creating environmental solutions will come if we look at our assumptions with which we work with. We need to begin to take risks, and we need to begin to re-explore whether it is nuclear energy, whether it is solar energy, whether it is the hydro energy. We need to rethink. That is one. Second, we need to look at education. If we were to look at, instead of helping people, like growing up in India and seeing the English educational system and American educational system, American educational system was a lot better because it focuses on the creativity of the persons rather than rote learning and all of it in India. That was my initial opinion. I looked down on the Indian education for a long time, till I began to start researching on various Indian executives who are doing extraordinarily well, and looking at the Indian creativity, whether you call it a jugaad innovation or a frugal innovation. Some of them I wrote about, and then we researched. I realized there is something about rote learning. There is something about disciplined, structured way of looking for patterns has got a place and time for it. I think it is not either or, it is include and transcend, if I were to bring Ken Wilber's thought of it. So both and is not good enough anymore. We need to include the education that we have, and we need to transcend to get people to think beyond. So in some respects, if the AI challenges educational system, how we teach in the schools, how the students do their exercises and how they take their exams, I know open book exams did the same thing, and Khan Academy had done the same thing for people. So I think the AI gives us an opportunity to reinvent, whether teachers need to be knowledge givers, whether they need to be healers and providers of support, like guide on the side, Bill, like what you mentioned, or does it allow people to, teachers and educational systems, to get students to be silent, to tap into who they are and their roots, and bring their integrity, their heart, mind, and the actions to be integrated, aligned, like what you said, Ximena. How do we bring the alignment within the students and teachers and other people, so that they bring from their heart and soul what it is that they are learning and what it is that they want to contribute? So they become the source. They don't become the consumer of information. The students become the source of new wisdom and new knowledge. I think that is a potential we are yet to explore. We don't know how to deal with that kind of potential. And I think we need to work together on that.
Prasad, I think this is a perfect place to, you leave us with these questions about potential, about, the integration of going beyond of integrating beyond the yes and, no? And I'm gonna write it, somewhere where I can see it every day. Wake up and smell the flowers versus wake up and smell the coffee. There's very different implications. So
Yes.
I absolutely, I want to wake up and smell the flowers. That's how I want to start my day. So, Judy, we're right on the hour. Shall we close now or open it up to so a big thank you before we do that, a big thank you, Bill and Prasad. I wish, I think this conversation can continue going. We're gonna find new spaces, in Edgewalkers, and I'm also talking with Craig, maybe with the Conscious Leadership Guild as well, and maybe so we need more spaces to continue this conversation. So thank you.
Ximena, thank you. And absolutely, there's a hunger for this conversation to continue. It's like I can feel we've just touched the surface and people would love to continue this conversation. So we'll find ways to do that, again, especially in partnership with Conscious Leadership Guild. And a number of people are here from Conscious Leadership Guild and from each of our networks. It's like as we interconnect our networks, we move more towards realizing the oneness that really is the underpinnings of not only artificial intelligence, but spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, universal intelligence. So I would invite each of our three panelists, Ximena, Bill, and Prasad, to close out with just one piece of wisdom or a wise question that you would like to leave everyone with. And then I invite our panelists to just stay on as everyone else leaves the Edgewalker Café. So,
Okay. I would say this comes down to ABCs of intelligence. Artificial intelligence is provoking the question for A. B is biological intelligence is not fully tapped into yet. Then how do we awaken the conscious intelligence in us before we talk about whether the AI will become conscious? I think if we can look at the ABCs of intelligence, then we can look at how does our consciousness with the intellect of AI can produce, whatever that it needs to, that allows the lamp to burn brightly. Then, like Jalaluddin Rumi says, how can I ever polish your mirror if you keep getting irritated at every rub? So we will stop polishing the mirrors and lighting up our lamps to burn more brightly.
Beautiful. I would say, let us recognize that we have 1 foot in the visionary, 1 foot in the practical, but also 1 foot in the code and 1 foot in the myth. And as we've shared today, AI is reflecting us back to ourselves. Some days that is inspiring. Other days it's very chilling. But what I see most is the fact that we are desperate to feel seen, but we're afraid of what's looking at us. Again, going back to where we started in that shame. Meet shame's gaze and take back your dignity and take back your agency. And we can do this together.
And one more quick point, because you brought the guilt, pride, and shame bill. It is up to us, Edgewalkers. GPS doesn't have to be guilt, pride, and shame. We can ontologically reframe G for gratitude instead of guilt. P for instead of pride, we can bring purpose, because that is one of the 6 values we talk about. Yes, instead of being shame, it can be service, or it can be something else. So my request is to reframe GPS for yourself first. Once you do it, then you can bring it into your life. Thanks.
I love this, Prasad, because precisely the question that I was going to offer is, who are we when we use AI?
Yeah.
And now that you've given us these two options of GPS, which GPS is really driving our use of AI?
Wow. Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lovely.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month at the Edgewalker Café on July 24th, and have a wonderful month. Be wise.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Wonderful.